The White House on Wednesday asked Congress to allocate an extra $4.5 billion in emergency funding to deal with the crisis along the southern border. What crisis? The one inside Donald Trump's head, of course. The request includes $3.3 billion for humanitarian assistance, which the administration said would be used to increase shelters and care for unaccompanied minors in addition to processing arrivals. About $1.1 billion would go towards other border operations like expanding the number of detention beds and providing more investigation resources. The $1.1 billion includes $377 million for the Pentagon, which is providing logistical and active duty support at the border. The remaining $178 million would go towards technological upgrades and paying law enforcement. Now, none of these funds would go towards President Trump's border wall, which he has still failed to secure funding for, according to the White House. Trump declared an emergency in February in order to reprogram about $8 billion in military funds to start construction on the wall, however. Now, a White House official said Wednesday that the administration could use the reprogrammed Department of Defense funds from the emergency declaration to aid the humanitarian situation at the border, which we created. The idea that you take DoD funds and shift them to the Department of Homeland Security is outside of the scope of authority, a senior administration official said. Now, the White House funding request came a day after Acting Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McAleenan told lawmakers that the current funding, which was signed into law in March, would run out before the fiscal year ends on September 30th. Given the scale of what we're facing, we will exhaust our resources before the end of this fiscal year, he said in a statement. Now, Wednesday's request said that funds for unaccompanied children crossing the border into the U.S. will run out by June. So, again, we're starting to see the money run out across the board for these operations that we created. House Appropriations Committee Chair Nita Lowry, a Democrat from New York, on Wednesday slammed the administration's cruel and ill-conceived immigration policies, but said she would carefully review this request in totality and, where possible, work with the Senate and the White House to make conditions at the border more humane. Congress in February approved $415 million for humanitarian relief on the border, part of $14.9 billion designated for Customs and Border Protection in the DHS funding bill. The White House said the United States has apprehended more than 360,000 migrant families crossing the border illegally in the first half of the year, almost twice the number that it saw in the same period last year, and more than the total number in all of 2017 alone. The number of border apprehensions and denials of people attempting to enter the United States has spiked to 92,607 in March, up from 66,884 the previous month, according to the government figures. Earlier this week, Trump sought far-reaching changes in how asylum cases are treated also, which the White House said would seek to safeguard our system against rampant abuse of our asylum process. Democrats blasted the plan, which would impose fees and require permits from those seeking asylum, which that's a whole new fucking thing. Of course, Donald Trump's coming up with a thing to charge people fees to seek asylum in the United States. Again, we have an inflated border situation right now. We're at a 4-year low of illegal border crossings, and Donald Trump is making it out like we have these massive waves and waves and waves of caravans crossing the border illegally, and that's just not true. That's false statements. We had our government rip families apart. Wasn't needed, not necessary. It's illegal under international law that is clarified as a form of genocide, and no one is holding us accountable. No one will hold the United States accountable. Until that happens, the Trump administration will continue to run rampant on violating human rights, and that's what we are seeing. We wouldn't need all this extra money for border protection and security if Donald Trump didn't start ripping apart families where we'd have to try and put them back together. But as we're learning, the Trump administration is saying that it's too hard for us to find the families that we ripped apart. So therefore, we are putting these fucking kids into adoption agencies and putting them up for adoption while their parents are in detention centers down at the southern border. And you think that's right? That's all I have for you guys on this clip. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Follow me on Instagram and also on Twitter. And also, don't forget, this Thursday, we have a live stream here on YouTube with Nico House about the 2020 candidates so far. So make sure to check it out. And once again, I'm Patrick, and this has been your Daily Ember.